Pivot or end your show with purpose. Welcome to the podcast Why. I'm Brett Johnson, my podcast guy, your trusted friend in podcasting. This show is here to help you reconnect with the real why behind your podcast so you can keep showing up with clarity and confidence. In this season, we've been talking about how to work with your why in very practical ways. Writing your why statement, turning it into a show promise, choosing topics through that lens, saying no from your why, shaping your intros and outros, and planning mini seasons that move your listener in a clear direction. Today, we're going to talk about something a lot of podcasters think about but don't always admit out loud. Is it time to pivot or even end your show? And if so, how do you do that with purpose? Every show has a life cycle. Your why can deepen, evolve, or even change. Your listener can change. You can change. Sometimes that means your current version of the show doesn't quite fit anymore. The problem is, instead of handling that honestly, most podcasters just slowly disappear. No explanation, no closure. The feed just stops. Here's the big idea for today. Your why is not just your engine for continuing, it's also your compass for deciding when and how to change direction. Pivoting or ending a show doesn't have to be a shameful retreat. It can be a strategic, honest move that respects your mission, your listener, and your own life. In this episode, I want to walk you through what it looks like to use your why to make those big decisions in a grounded way, and how to communicate them so your podcast story ends or changes with integrity, not with a ghosted feed. Let me share a composite story built from several podcasters I've worked with over the years. Imagine a host, we'll call her Claire. Claire started her podcast a few years ago, aimed at people in a particular stage of their career. Her why was clear at the time. She wanted to help people survive and grow through that season with more confidence and less chaos. For a good stretch, the show did exactly that. Episodes were focused, the promise made sense, and she felt connected to her listener. But over time, things shifted. Her own life moved forward. She changed roles in her career, gained new experiences, and found herself less personally connected to that original stage. The listener she was talking to 3 years ago wasn't exactly the listener she wanted to speak to now. Her internal why began to evolve. She was more interested in deeper leadership questions, or in the next phase beyond that initial stage. Meanwhile, her show was still built around the old why. She noticed a few signs. It was getting harder to feel excited about new episodes. Topic ideas felt recycled. And she caught herself daydreaming about a different show that talked about slightly different things in a slightly different way to a slightly different person. When we talked, she started with the usual language, I think I'm burned out. Maybe I just need a break. Maybe I should force myself to be more consistent. But as we dug deeper, it became clear. Her why had grown, and her current show hadn't grown with it. I asked her a few questions. If you were starting a podcast today from scratch, with who you are now, who would it be for, and what would it be about? Does your current show still reflect that? And is your original listener still the person you feel most called to serve, or has that shifted? Her answers were honest. She still cared about her old audience, but she no longer felt like the best person to walk them through that season. She wanted to speak to people a little further along, dealing with different challenges. Her why was tilting toward a new group and a new set of questions. At that point, she had a choice. 1, force herself to keep making the original show out of obligation and fear of disappointing people. 2, quietly stop and ghost the feed, hoping nobody would notice. Or 3, use her evolving why as a guide to either pivot or close the show with intention. We walk through what each option would feel like 6 months down the line. Option 1 looked like resentment and slow decline. Option 2 looked like a quiet, nagging regret. And option 3, which was scary, looked like honesty and alignment. Because her new why wasn't just a minor tweak, we decided a pivot made sense. More than just silently changing the show under the same branding. She wanted to serve a new stage of the journey with a slightly different tone and format. So we used her why to shape a plan. one final mini-season under the current show where she wrapped up a few key themes for her original audience, a final episode where she spoke directly to her listener, explained how her journey and why it shifted, and blessed them, not as numbers, but as people she'd had the privilege of speaking to, and a clear explanation of what she was doing next, either a new show or a different way of serving. Some listeners would come with her, some wouldn't. Both were okay. We wrote something like this for her closing episode. When I started this podcast, I was right where you are. My why was to help you get through this season. Over the last few years, both of us have grown. My work is pulling me toward helping people in the next stage, and I want to honor that honestly. That means this version of the show is coming to an end, but the heart behind it isn't going away. That's ending a show with purpose. That's a pivot guided by a North Star, not by panic. For other hosts I've worked with, the story has gone a little differently. Sometimes the why hasn't shifted, but the format, workload, or business model around the show is no longer sustainable. In those cases, we use their why to redesign the show. Maybe shorter episodes, seasons instead of an endless weekly grind, or the focus narrowed, so they could keep going without burning out. The common thread in all these stories is this. Your why is the tool you use to decide whether you should keep going as is, pivot, or end the show. Not your fear, not comparison, not just the numbers. Let's bring this down to you and your podcast. I want to say this clearly. Asking whether it's time to pivot or end your show does not mean you've failed. It means you're paying attention. It means you care enough to ask, is this still aligned with my purpose, my listener, and my life? Here's a simple reflection process you can walk through. Step 1. Check your current why against your current show. Take your 1 to 2 sentence why statement from earlier this season and ask, does my current show still reflect this why? Does my content, my format, and my listener match what I've written here? If the answer is yes, great. You might just need tweaks to your format or schedule, not a big pivot. If the answer is not really, that's your first signal. Step 2, ask what has changed. Be honest with yourself. Has my personal interest or passion moved in a new direction? Has my ideal listener changed? Am I actually talking in my heart to a different person now? And has my capacity changed? Time, energy, resources. So the current version is no longer sustainable. Naming what's changed will help you see whether you need an evolution or a completion. And step 3, decide between 3 options. Stay, pivot, or end, with your why in the center. Ask yourself, 1, if I stayed with this show as is, what would it look like and feel like 6 months from now? 2, if I pivoted, changed the focus, format, or who it's for, what would that look like? And 3, if I ended this show intentionally, what purpose could that serve for me and my listener? None of these answers are right or wrong on their own. The key is which one is most aligned to your current why. Now here's today's why question. Right now, given who you are and what you know, what would be the most honest, why-aligned next chapter for your podcast? Continuing as is with a few tweaks, pivoting to focus on a new stage or listener, or ending the show with intention so something new can begin. Write down your answer without editing it. You don't have to act on it today, but getting that truth out of your head and onto paper is a powerful first step. If you sense that a pivot or an ending might be on the horizon, you don't have to navigate that alone. This is exactly the kind of conversation I have with podcasters all the time, looking at your why, your listener, your numbers, and your reality, and then designing a thoughtful plan for what's next. You can book a clarity call with me. Just head over to My Podcast Guy online. We'll talk through whether it's time to stay, shift, or close, and how to do that in a way that honors you and your audience. Thank you for being with me through Season 2 of the Podcast Why. I'm Brett Johnson, My Podcast Guy, and I'm grateful you keep showing up to do this deeper work. I'll talk to you in Season 3 when we look at the 5 components of a strong why and how they play out in the real world of your show.